Hey, this is Joe with Grow It Build It, and today I'm going to tell you how to grow black walnut trees from seed. So black walnut trees are one of the fastest growing hardwoods in all of North America. Grown in the open, it can have a beautiful round shape and reach heights well over 100 feet tall. Valued by humans and wildlife alike, the tree hosts dozens of insect larvae that will feed the birds. The nuts are a nutritious food source for both humans and squirrels and chipmunks. And the lumber is prized for its beauty, grain, and strength. And it's not too difficult to grow from seed, but there are a few key steps you should take to ensure successful germination. So in this video, we're going to cover all aspects of growing a black walnut tree from seed, including where to locate the trees and a brief way to ID it, when to collect the seeds, how to prepare the seed and test its viability, how to cold stratify or winter sow it, and then when you can expect germination and establishment. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive into it. Okay, so for black walnut trees, where can you find them? Well, black walnut trees are native to eastern North America, but have become established in most of the continent. You can find them growing in areas with moist to medium moist soil, so near streams, ponds, or in lower lying areas. And for a quick ID, you can identify them out in the open by examining the leaves and bark. I do have a decent set of pictures and what to look for IDing the tree at our website. I'll link to that article below in the show notes. So for the trunk and bark, black walnut trees will have branching that starts low and will eventually form a round to oval round shape or crown. And the bark of black walnut tree consists of large, rough ridges that run vertically. It's going to be black or gray in color, and the limbs and branches will have a bark that is gray and more smooth. Also, if you're trying to ID the tree in the winter, you can always find some empty, or most of the time you can find some empty walnut shells on the ground. For leaves, black walnut trees are compound with alternating leaves on a pinnate odd structure. So you're going to have this kind of leaf grouping or array, and the leaves will be slightly staggered down a central stem, one on one side, then move down a little, and one on the other. They almost look paired and opposite, but they're not. And it'll terminate at the end with a single leaf. Individual leaves are lance-shaped and 1 to 3 inches long usually by about half as wide. The edges are sawtooth or serrated, and the leaves will be kind of medium green in color on the top, and the underside is going to be light green, more like a winter green, and the veination will be fairly prominent. In autumn, you're going to see these leaves turn yellow before almost any other tree, and they're always yellow. So it's an indication that autumn is approaching, and it's also a good time to go get the seeds or the nuts. And if you're wondering if you found a black walnut tree and it is midsummer, just look up. If you see any round green golf ball shaped balls hanging from the limbs, you've probably found a black walnut tree. If by chance they were more oblong or football shaped, then they're probably butternut, which is still a delicious nut, but it's not a black walnut. Okay, so for when to collect the seeds, you don't want to collect the nuts prematurely. The longer the nut stays on the tree, the more likely it is to properly form and be more likely to germinate. I usually wait until nuts begin falling naturally from the trees. Then I just go pick them up off the ground or directly from the tree. I suggest you gather twice as many nuts as trees that you want. So if you want 5 trees, get at least 10 nuts, maybe 15 would be better, as some of these nuts will not be viable. And before I get into the preparation and viability of the seeds and planting and all that, I want to say that if you are finding this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, as it really does help my channel out and I do appreciate it. Okay, so now that we've gathered our nuts, we've got to test their viability and prepare them. So even if they fell naturally from the tree, not everything is going to be viable. So to test it, we're first going to remove the husk. And if we're just going to be planting 10 or 20 nuts and that's the only ones we're going to dehusk, then using a chef's knife or a butcher knife, even a hunting knife, is perfectly fine. But before we cut anything, we want to put on some kind of gloves, rubber or latex or something like that. The husks will stain your skin for a long time. It'll stain them yellow to black depending on the age of the nut. And also know that the husks will stain your clothes, so dress appropriately. But carefully cut around the perimeter of the nut, then twist the knife to pop off the husk. Don't compost the husks, as they contain juglone, which is a toxin that can stress or kill certain garden and vegetable plants like tomatoes. Then get a bucket with water, and we are going to immerse the nuts in water for about a minute to test the viability. Nuts that sink should be planted. Nuts that float should be discarded. So after about 60 seconds, remove and discard the floaters. Continue to soak the sinkers for, overnight or a day, as that can help raise the germination rates. And when you're done with that, don't let the seeds dry out, as they may lose viability. So now we're going to jump directly into stratification. Black walnuts, we're going to need a cold stratification period of 70 to 120 days to germinate. If you think about how nature does it, the nut falls off the tree in late summer, early fall. A squirrel or chipmunk will quickly eat or plant the nuts to save for later. Any nut they don't find might germinate in the spring. So they sit in the ground all winter. We have to do the same thing to our black walnuts, either by planting them outside or cold stratifying them in the fridge. So you can actually just winter sow these and directly plant them in the ground if you want, or in a pot, but you're going to have to protect them from squirrels. I plan on growing several different tree species this year, and I'm going to winter sow these. But at the time of preparing these walnuts, I didn't have my protection ready, my little hardware screen cloth I built. So I'm actually going to cold stratify these in the refrigerator for a bit. To cold stratify the walnuts, I'm placing them in a large Ziploc bag that is filled with a moist mixture of sphagnum peat moss and vermiculite. The sphagnum peat moss helps keep any fungus away, and the vermiculite does well at holding moisture, similar to sand. You could pretty much get by with sand if you wanted to, but to prepare the mixture, I just mix them up 50-50, adding water as I go, and I'm looking for a consistency of a wrung-out sponge or rag. Basically, if I can pick up a handful and have just a couple of drops of water fall out, I know I'm probably pretty good. But I just have to put this Ziploc bag in the fridge until I'm ready to winter sow them. Now, if you have plenty of space in your refrigerator, you could just leave this bag in the fridge until spring and use that as your cold treatment. But I'm going to be doing other tree seeds, so I don't want to take up my fridge space with all these big bags of, walnuts and other ones. All right, so how to actually plant these nuts. So I've pulled my Ziploc baggie out of the fridge, and I'm going to be using an old planter for my winter sowing container. You could use any kind of pot that's at least, 4 or 5, I'd say 6 inches deep, because black walnut trees will have a taproot that'll go out way before anything pops up above the soil. But I'm taking an old planter and I'm going to fill it halfway up or so with 50-50 potting soil and topsoil. And I'm using topsoil 50% just to save money because it's cheaper. But I'm going to plant the black walnuts 1 to 2 inches deep, and then I'm going to set that planter outside with my screen on top and weighed down by a couple of bricks all winter long. You really have to protect these from the squirrels, as they will go dig up and eat your walnuts or any other tree seed you're trying to grow usually. And a couple of other notes on this: you don't have to use a large planter. You can easily use any pot that was at least 6 to 8 inches deep. Black walnuts will produce a taproot, and that taproot's going to emerge from the nut at germination well before you see anything on top of the soil. So a deep pot is necessary. So for germination, if all goes well and no squirrel is strong enough to lift your screen, you can expect germination in early to mid-spring once temperatures start warming up consistently. I'm in zone 6, and this year that was in May. May 10th actually was the first germination. I let the walnuts germinate continually for another 3 weeks or so before I figured they were all done, and then I carefully potted up each seedling into its own little pot, or own large pot. Now, once I pot them up into their own pot, that's going to kind of stress the plant and the roots. So you're going to want to put them in a mostly shaded area for a week or so. But then once that's done, you can pretty much plant them directly wherever you like. The sooner you plant them, the more established they're going to be, and the faster you'll get a nut-producing tree or a nice shade tree. Now, when you go to plant these out, if you're trying to produce nuts for food for yourself, you want to space them at least 12 feet apart. Otherwise, go with 25 feet or so. All right, time for us to review. So black walnut trees, you can find them naturally in most of North America in moist to medium moist areas. IDing them isn't too hard whether or not the foliage is present, but you're going to want to collect the seeds in late summer or early fall when the nuts are naturally falling from the tree. Remove the husks and test the viability by soaking them, and discard anything that doesn't sink. And then they're going to need a cold treatment for roughly 4 months, or you can just winter sow them. And just make sure that no matter what, whenever you plant these out in the winter or the spring, protect them from the squirrels. And seeds should be germinated once outside temperatures are consistently warm. And yeah, so that's all I've got for this video. If you found the information helpful, please give me a thumbs up, as it really helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments and I will answer them as best as I can. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys all have a good one, and good luck starting your seeds. And keep the squirrels away if you can. Thank you.